Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we're heading to Jurong, a lively area in Singapore. Picture narrow alleys filled with the smell of herbs from old shops mixed with the glow of modern skyscrapers. Neon signs from Chinese restaurants light up the streets, but in the dark corners, secrets are waiting. Meet Ava, a 23-year-old anthropology student of Chinese descent. She's curious about her roots, which her family left behind. One day, she buys a small bell tied with red thread from Auntie Sue's herb shop, thinking it's a lucky charm. But when a ting-ting sound echoes in the dark, mysteries from the past start to unfold. Ava teams up with Lucas, an exchange student from England who loves Asian culture, and Lin, an Indian student obsessed with spooky stories. They explore an abandoned warehouse once home to Chinese workers 100 years ago. What will they find? What secrets does the bell hide? Have you ever felt that old objects carry stories waiting to be discovered? Get ready, because this tale will take you through the cool breeze of Jurong's alleys and maybe let you hear a faint ting-ting from the shadows. Imagine you're on a Jurong train line. The wheels clatter rhythmically on the tracks in a nearly empty carriage. City lights flash through the window, casting moving shadows on the seats. An old man in a faded shirt sits next to you. His thin white hair and mysterious smile catch your eye. A faint smell of old perfume mixes with the metallic scent of the train. He leans closer and starts speaking. This is a story about Ava, a young woman who found a bell tied with red thread, he says softly, his voice full of mystery. It's not just a charm, it's tied to a forgotten past. The train slows down. The station announcement hums faintly. You glance out the window and see Jurong's lights glowing in the distance. The old man smiles and whispers, "Listen closely, because this story will take you to the secrets of spirits crying in the shadows." A cool breeze brushes past you, and the story of Singapore begins. Ava, 23, an anthropology student, walks through a narrow alley in Jurong. Afternoon sunlight bounces off tall buildings and faded red Chinese signs on old shops. The smell of street food mixes with herbs from Auntie Sue's shop. Auntie Sue, a kind 60-year-old, smiles warmly at Ava. Kids run and laugh in the alley as neon lights flicker on in the evening. Ava spots a small bell tied with red thread on a shelf in Auntie Sue's shop. It's delicate, with ancient Chinese leaf patterns carved on it. The red thread is tightly knotted. "This will bring you luck," Auntie Sue says, but her eyes have a strange glint, like she knows something Ava doesn't. Ava smiles, not thinking much of it. She's researching Chinese rituals in Singapore, and this bell seems perfect for her project. Ava isn't alone. She's with Lucas, an exchange student from England who's excited about everything Asian, from bak kut teh soup to Chinese signs he can't read. Then there's Lin, an Indian student who loves mysteries and questions everything. The three stay in an old warehouse once home to Chinese workers a century ago. Its wooden walls are cracked, and the air smells of dust and dampness. Faint car sounds drift through broken windows. Ava feels an emptiness inside. She grew up in a modern Singaporean family. Her dad always said, "Chinese traditions are outdated. We're modern Singaporeans now." But Ava feels disconnected. She remembers her grandma taking her to Chinese temples as a kid, telling stories of spirits and gods, or teaching her how to light incense properly. After her grandma died 10 years ago, her family left those traditions behind. One day, Ava talks to her dad on the phone while walking through Jurong. "Why waste time on old things?" he asks, annoyed. Ava stays quiet, feeling cut off from something important. Lucas, walking beside her, overhears and chimes in. "I think traditions are cool. We don't have stuff like this in England. I want to try lighting incense." Lin laughs. "Careful, Lucas. You might burn down the warehouse." Ava smiles a little, but inside, she's still searching for answers. She remembers temple visits with her grandma, the smell of incense and the sound of prayers. She promises herself to find the meaning of her lost Chinese roots. The first night in the warehouse, Ava can't sleep. A ting-ting sound comes from her bag, where the bell sits still on an old wooden table. Her heart races as she grabs it. The red thread trembles slightly, like it's been touched by a breeze, but all the windows are closed. The sound rings again, louder, closer, coming from a dark corner of the warehouse. A chill runs down Ava's neck. She walks to a dusty old mirror in the room. In the reflection, she sees an old woman in an ancient Chinese dress, tears streaming down her pale face, her eyes full of sadness. Ava screams and turns around, but no one's there. The ting-ting echoes in her ears. She runs to wake Lucas and Lin. Lucas, with messy hair, mumbles, "What? Bad dream?" But Lin looks worried. "It might not be just a dream," he says. The next day, the ting-ting rings again in the afternoon, while Ava reads in the warehouse. She glances at a window and sees the old woman's shadow for a moment. Lucas, eating instant noodles nearby, notices her face. "What? Don't tell me you saw a ghost again?" he says, his voice shaky. Lin checks the window. "I felt a cold breeze just now, but the window's closed." Ava feels uneasy. She wonders if the bell is more than a charm. Thinking of Auntie Sue's words, she decides to return to the herb shop. At Auntie Sue's shop, the air smells of herbs and incense. Shelves are packed with charms and dried herbs. Auntie Sue looks at the bell seriously. "This isn't a lucky charm," she says. "It's a funeral bell, funeral bell, used in Chinese funerals 100 years ago to guide spirits to graves. If it rings on its own, a spirit might still be lost." Ava feels a chill. Auntie Sue explains that Jurong's Chinese community used these bells for people who died without family to keep their spirits from wandering. "If you see a spirit," she says, "bury the bell at the old cemetery in Jurong." She suggests Ava meet Auntie Lee, her friend who knows local beliefs. Ava, Lucas, and Lin visit Auntie Lee at her old wooden house in a nearby alley. Auntie Lee, 70, talks about a forgotten cemetery in Jurong. "It's hidden in the woods behind this alley," she says. "People long ago said spirits without proper burials linger there." She frowns at the bell. Things like this shouldn't be taken from their place. The three meet Professor Chen, an anthropology expert on Singapore's Chinese history. At the university library, he shows them old documents about Jurong. In the 1900s, Jurong was home to Chinese workers at the port. Many died from disease or accidents without proper funerals. Their spirits might still wander. Professor Chen finds records about funeral bells used to guide spirits to peace. If this bell rings, he says, a spirit might need a proper ritual. In the warehouse, Ava finds her grandma's old notebook in a hidden wooden box. Its yellowed pages, stained with tears, tell of Chinese workers in the 1900s. An old woman, a worker's wife, died while pregnant. Her daughter vanished during a big storm in Jurong. The woman's spirit was tied to a funeral bell used in her burial. Ava feels guilty for her family's rejection of Chinese traditions. She remembers her grandma trying to teach her to light incense, but her dad called it a waste of time. She feels like she's betrayed her grandma's memory. Lucas and Lin help decode the notebook, written in Old Chinese. Lucas mispronounces Chinese words, making Lin laugh. "You're worse than me. At least I can read Sanskrit." Professor Chen smiles and translates. The notebook mentions a hidden cemetery in the woods near Jurong and other charms, like a paper lantern with strange scratches, possibly linked to the bell. Ava, Lucas, Lin, and Professor Chen explore an abandoned house near the old cemetery, once owned by a Chinese workers' leader. Its wooden walls are rotting, scattered with old Chinese charms like paper lanterns and copper coins. Ava finds a letter written to the old woman from her missing daughter. It speaks of sadness over her mother's death without a proper funeral and the daughter's search for her during a storm. The Ting-Ting rings when Ava touches the letter, as if the spirit is trying to speak. Lucas trips over some wood, knocking charms to the floor. "I didn't mean to," he shouts. Lin teases, "If the ghost gets mad, you deal with it." Ava finds a wooden box with a drawing of the old woman's family. It shows her holding a little girl and a silver ornament with Chinese leaf patterns, like the bell. Professor Chen says this ornament might belong to the lost daughter. Ava feels a deep connection. She decides to use the ornament in a ritual. That night, Ava dreams of the old woman again. She sees Jurong 100 years ago, people in old Chinese clothes walking through narrow alleys. A little girl runs after her mother, but a storm destroys everything. The girl's cries echo in the dream. Ava wakes up in tears, feeling the pain of the old woman and her lost daughter. Ava leads the team to the old Jurong cemetery at night. Thick fog blurs everything. Trees sway in the cold wind, and the air smells of wet earth and rotting leaves. The bell's ting-ting grows louder, guiding them. Old graves are cracked and covered in moss. Some have Chinese names, but others are empty, forgotten. Ava feels heavy-hearted. She thinks of her dad saying, "Traditions don't matter," but now she knows they're part of who she is. In a dream that night, Ava sees a funeral with people in white following a bell, singing sad songs. The old woman appears and says, "Bury the bell, bury the ornament, free me and my daughter." The dream shifts to the little girl crying in a storm. Ava wakes up in tears, feeling her family's guilt for abandoning Chinese heritage. She decides to complete the ritual. Lucas is scared. "If it's a real ghost, I'll say a spell," he says, voice shaky. Lin laughs. "Your spell will scare the ghost away with your bad accent." Professor Chen smiles. "Fear is part of learning," he says. "Respecting the past brings peace." Ava, Lucas, Lin, and Professor Chen work with Auntie Sue and Auntie Lee to hold a burial ritual at the old cemetery. They bring incense, flowers, paper money, and a paper lantern. The smell of incense fills the air. Chanting echoes in the silence. Lucas tries lighting incense but chokes on the smoke, waving it away. Lin teases, "Are you doing a ritual or a comedy show?" Auntie Sue explains that burying the bell and ornament will help the old woman and her daughter find peace. Ava places the silver ornament in a small grave next to the bell. In her heart, she apologizes to her grandma and promises to honor her Chinese heritage. As the grave is covered, moonlight lights up the cemetery. The Ting-Ting stops, as if the spirits are free. Ava's nightmares end. She writes her research on Chinese rituals and shares it with the local community. Her work inspires students and Singapore's Chinese community. Ava visits her dad and tells him about Jurong. "Dad, traditions aren't just old stories. They're part of us," she says. He pauses, then smiles. "Maybe you're right," he says. They understand each other better. Lucas signs up for Chinese lessons, complaining, "It's harder than exploring a cemetery," but he studies to learn more about the culture. Lin writes a blog comparing Indian and Chinese spirit beliefs, joking, "I'm never buying old stuff again, especially if it rings." Professor Chen smiles and says, "Every story has a lesson, and every spirit has a story." Auntie Lee gives Ava a small charm, a necklace with Chinese leaf patterns. "To protect you," she says. Ava sits in Jurong at night, watching the alley glow with shop lights. The smell of street food lingers. This old alley holds traces of the past amid Singapore's modernity. For the first time, Ava feels at peace, connected to her roots. She starts a project to explore Chinese community history, ensuring Jurong's stories and forgotten spirits live on. The train stops at the last station. The carriage lights brighten as the old man who told the story stands and walks away, his shadow fading into the bustling crowd. You look out the window, watching Jurong's lights dim in the distance. The station announcement hums softly, as if covering the silence of the story's end. Ava brought peace to the old woman's spirit and herself. The bell is quiet now, but its memory echoes in your heart. You grab your bag, step off the train, and feel a cool breeze on your face, pulling you back to reality. But deep inside, you know Singapore's past holds more stories waiting to be found. You leave the station and maybe hear a faint ting-ting in the dark. So, what did you think of Ava, Lucas, Lin, and Professor Chen's adventure in Jurong? That red threaded bell makes me think of old stuff at my grandma's house, but I'm not shaking it at night. This story shows how uncovering the past can change how we see ourselves. Ava connected with her Chinese roots. Lucas learned about courage and tricky Chinese words. Lin got a cool story for his blog, and Professor Chen reminded us that every story matters. Have you ever found an old object that felt like it held a story, or heard a strange sound in the dark? If you do, don't shake it. especially if it goes ting-ting. See you in the next story, folks, and let's hope no ghosts follow us. And with that, our journey into another strange story comes to a close. We hope you found our peek into the peculiar to your liking and maybe even shared a little smile with us. If you enjoyed this episode of the Otherworldly Stories, please remember to give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. You can also share this story with a friend who appreciates a good mystery and a bit of a laugh. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, stay safe out there and keep an eye on the shadows.